Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. So today's video is the top 5 books that I read in 2021. These are not necessarily books that came out in 2021. In fact, I don't think that any of them was published in 2021. And it was hard to narrow down this list, so I will have a whole bunch of honorable mentions at the end, but let's just dive right into the top 5 books that I read in 2021. The first one was A Long Way Down. This is by Jason Reynolds. I listened to this book in audiobook format and it is narrated by the author. So this is a novella, it's YA, it's written in verse, and honestly to me the writing was like the strongest part of this whole book. It's very poignant. It deals with a lot of heavy topics. The sort of premise is that Will is our main character. He's a young teenager. There has been gun violence in his life that has resulted in someone he loves death, and he has decided to seek revenge upon the perpetrator. And so he is riding an elevator from his floor of his apartment building down to the ground floor with the intention of going off to commit more, to perpetuate the cycle of gun violence. And on each level the elevator stops in each floor, people get on who are not really there. They're people from his life, some of whom are people has met, some people are he's never met. Many of them are deceased, and basically he constantly is discussing with all these other people the topic of gun violence and perpetuation of violence and trauma that he has gone through and that these other people have gone through in his life. So it's extremely heavy content, but it's handled so poignantly. The verse is so well written. There's multiple beautiful quotes. There's great metaphors. I really felt like it was powerful writing, full of truth and hard hitting. I spent half of this book misty eyed. It's very raw and emotional, and for that reason, I just felt that it really made a lasting impact. It was something that I kept thinking about throughout the rest of the year, and that's why it's made my top list. The second book that I want to talk about is Transcendent Kingdom. This is by Gyasi. And this book is maybe a little bit more niche for me niche that I liked it because it was just so right up my alley. The premise of this book is that Gifty is our main character and she is working on her PhD, and it is in neuroscience. She's also taking care of her mother, who I think is going through a depression part of her life, and throughout the whole book Gifty is sort of doing a lot of reminiscing and also thinking about and reflecting upon and contemplating and hard critical thinking about her mother and neuroscience and the addiction process and reward process that she is both studying for her thesis, and also what that has to do with her brother who has passed away years previously from drug addiction issues. And then there's also this strong theology element because Gifty was raised very religiously, and so she's sort of thinking a lot about what it means to be human and what is your soul, both from the neuroscience and scientific standpoint and also from the theological standpoint. So for me, that just rang all of my bells. I thought that the writing was really well done, and I highlighted multiple long passages in this book as well because it really just hit home for me. Neuroscience was one of my majors. I love to do sort of philosophical and theological thought experiments and discussions, and so it just really hit home for me a lot of the areas of my life that I'm interested in. So I don't know for sure if none of what I've said already sounds interesting to you, then it might not be your book, but for me it just hit all these sweet spots and was done so well that it made my top list. The third book I'm going to talk about is Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. I heard a lot of people talking about this at the end-ish of 2020 and finally got around to it in 2021. It did sneak up on me a little bit. I had to, get invested in the book because the first chunk, 15 to 20%, I was kind of like, what's the hype? I don't get it. But ultimately, I really love this story. So it is a story of sort of like a bank robbery gone haywire. This bank robber is trying to rob a bank and it's not going well, and so they like take off down the street and end up running into an apartment that is being shown because it's for sale, and so it sort of turns into this hostage situation. And so we are getting a lot of it's like a character study of all of the characters who are in this apartment, and we get to know each of them. I do think that to some extent some of these characters are caricatures and are maybe overdrawn, but they become much more real as we get to know them throughout the course of the book. And I really think the strength of this story is human connection and human communication. And I felt like Backman just layered in all of their stories so well, and how they wove together, and how I could really see in like a stressful situation, in a forced proximity situation, you would open up to other people, and they had real problems. There was loneliness, and there was marriage issues, and there was miscommunication that people felt a lot of like angst and hurt over, and that the others helped them with. And there is like a slight sort of mystery element to this, because the police are trying to figure out what has happened, and there was a gunshot and there was a bunch of blood, but like there's no body, but like what happened to the bank robber? So there is a little bit of that happening, but to me it felt like it sort of took a back seat to the drama of the character story, and I loved where we ended up and also the journey that we took there. I also personally found it relatively humorous where appropriate, so to me this book kind of crept up on me, but ultimately I really loved it. The fourth book I'm going to talk about is possibly controversial. I chose the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I think this might also be one of those it's a me thing, because this book was just really different from anything I normally read. I don't usually read horror. I don't even read too many like thrillers, but it really made an impact at the time that I read it and kind of blew my mind, and I was thinking about it a lot since then. We follow, it's set in like the late 80s, early 90s in, I think, Georgia, and we follow this group of, housewives, stay-at-home moms who have formed their own little book club and read about true crime and sort of nitty-gritty forensic stuff. And then a vampire comes to town and is preying on locals, particularly the young Black population. And it's sort of how these moms kind of have to deal with that new person in their lives. So there is I think there is social commentary happening here that Hendrix puts into the book, but he also, I think, introduces a lot of social commentary topics without, I saw some complaints that people said that this was like, that wasn't fully explored well enough. And to me, that wasn't really the point. That was the point to like introduce this topic to you, the reader, and then you could think further about it. But like, there was topics of race and feminism, and there's a lot of gaslighting happening in this book, and a lot of dismissal of these women who are perceived to just be these housewives. And so that was kind of enraging to read, but also thought-provoking for me personally. And I found this thriller to actually be thrilling. My frustration with every other thriller I read this year was that I wasn't thrilled. I think to me that element was more of the horror aspect, which I have pretty much zero experience reading, but I actually was like viscerally disgusted, got the heebie-jeebies multiple times while I was reading this book. And so to me, that element of the drama like really heightened my experience. So I don't know that this was like an amazing book, but it really had a strong impact on me and was something different than I normally do read. And so I think that that's why it made such an impact. But I do also agree with a number of complaints that I've seen about this book, how the topics weren't very fully explored, and there was too many topics, and there was kind of big gaping plot holes. And I think that was kind of interesting, but so I don't think it's like the perfect book, but for me, it just really like hit home in a way I had not expected to. The last book that I'm going to talk about with any length is Disability Visibility. I can't fully remember the subtitle, edited by Alice Wong. This is a collection of stories and speeches and essays that were written about and by disabled people, and they really cover quite an emotional range, from very heart-wrenching and hard-hitting and enraging. And so to me, I really took my time over the whole month of November dipping in and dipping out, because the point of this book to me was putting myself in a perspective that I have not very often read. And because this is a nonfiction title, I really was able to gain some perspective from voices that like I said, I don't read that often. It was an interesting perspective shift for me, and also a discussion around a lot of rhetoric that I haven't really like perfected, and it was hard hitting and made me think. And that was the part that I really liked the most, is I felt like I was taking in new information and like actually learning, but also like really seeing the whole point of the book was like, we're people too, and we just want to like live in this world, and a lot of, history and the way the laws currently are have not made that easy in any way. So my favorite part about reading this book was I could feel my own like thoughts kind of expanding as I read this, because I was putting myself in a perspective that I'm not used to. And so I think that this is something that I'm going to revisit, and certain essays I want to kind of dip in and out of again in the future. So if you like nonfiction and this is interesting, there's quite a range of essays in this book, and I would highly recommend it. So you may notice that none of my 5 books that I just mentioned are romance. And that is because while I had a great romance year, I didn't have an absolutely stunning and amazing romance year. I don't think I gave any romances a 5-star, except for Red, White, and Royal Blue, which I reread because it's like one of my all-time favorite books at this point. Plenty of very good ones, and some of these I'm going to mention right now. And so if you have a favorite romance of the year, please leave that down in the comments, because I am kind of bummed that I did not give any romances 5 stars this year, and I wish I had. So very quickly, my honorable mentions, I'm going to try to say the title, put the picture up here, and give like literally just 3 to 10 words about each book. Heated Rivalry. This is a smoking hot hockey male romance that is rivals to lovers and has great third act drama and tension. In the Dream House is a powerful LGBTQIAP+ memoir dealing with domestic abuse, and the prose is very lyrical and purple. Firekeeper's Daughter deals with STEM, young woman, new adult, and Native American culture, and there was a mystery element that I really appreciated, and I felt like it covered a lot of heavy themes, made me think. The Reckless Oath We Made. This is a unique book with some decent twists that I hadn't seen coming, and really made me feel vulnerable and emotional throughout the whole book. Spoiler alert, has really great sort of nerddom fandom involvement. I thought that it was very well written and strong on topics of consent and fat positivity. The Ice Planet Barbarians series was just kind of weird and a whole new subgenre to me, but also, spicy and, the spur. There we go. That's a good word. Wolf Gone Wild. Here's a romance. I felt like it was really readable and very friendly in tone, and it was just super charming, especially the main male character, and the whole book was really fun. I also really loved the second book, which is Don't Hex and Drive. It Happened One Summer is kind of goofy, but also still quite sweet, and I thought it was so spicy and sort of a surprise. Check Please Book 1 #hockey is a adorable, sweet, charming, slow burn, nostalgic graphic novel with a college setting, and also I think hockey. Yes, hockey. Any Way the Wind Blows. This was exactly what I wanted to complete this trilogy. It was extremely, extremely strong in emotional development, and that's what worked for me, even though it was not really a great book, nor a great, like, end of the series. The Things We Leave Unfinished was this, like, sweeping, romantic, epistolary romance that I was sort of surprised to love as much as I did, and I cried. And last but not least, They Called Us Enemy. This is a powerful, hard-hitting memoir about Japanese incarceration in the internment camps that is in George Takei's voice, and I really, really enjoyed the art style. Leave me a comment down below with any romance that you've loved throughout this year. I am definitely wishing to beef up my 5-star romances in the year of 2022. I do plan to put out a video of some of my most anticipated reads for 2022 coming soon, probably not this year, but early 2022. And thank you so much for watching this video, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.